Good.
How does
I
this?
feel like
Good.
okay. Sorry, just trying to figure this out. Oh, okay. I have to scroll through.
Hello.
Well, welcome everyone to our virtual camp all over the world.
Hello.
Oh, guys, oh, so good to
Hello.
see all of you. Should I mute everyone? Okay.
Yeah, 100% mute everybody.
Okay. All right. Well, this is interesting. This is the first time. As you saw on Facebook, what I posted a couple of weeks ago, we're planning on doing an alumni only, changing the concept, making it more structured, more formal. We're thinking about doing it probably maybe again this summer, but then the world kind of fell apart and we had to improvise. And I know all of us instructors, we're all getting a lot of texts just about what's going on, what our opinions are on how to take advantage of what's happening, how to stay safe, how to stay healthy. So we thought, well, why don't we just do this virtual thing right now? And here we are. So from instructors, I have James here. James, you want to unmute yourself?
Ah, there we go. Yeah, good. Great. Yeah,
So,
like Victoria said.
Matt somewhere.
Okay. Am I on? Can you guys hear me?
You're on.
This is my first Zoom call. Victoria, by the way, there still seem to be like people. I'm just looking at the lobby. Oh my God. I think, is that Bill Silva? Bill Silva. Bill Silva's here. What's up, buddy?
Just chilling.
Bill, where are you, man?
I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm using my virtual background to paint.
Okay, I was going to say, like,
that's a terrifying cloud behind you. Otherwise, are you talking about a volcano erupting or something?
Yeah. Let's see. We could do this instead.
Victoria, are you managing the waiting room or whatever? Because there still seem to be like people kind of joining.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to close this out, and I'm not going to click on this. Well, I would say just to sort of follow up on what Victoria was talking about. First of all, what a pleasure to see all you guys here. This is awesome. This is actually my first Zoom call. I'm a Zoom newbie, so this is pretty cool. Really pleased to see so many people. Really excited about this. Like Victoria is saying, we were planning on doing something different and special this year. We wanted to do an alumni only event. And instead of doing what we have always done in the past, where we, go through a very lengthy application process, and I have the personal pleasure of watching every single video out of like a bazillion videos and going through all of those and making all those tough decisions, we thought, let's do something different. Let's do alumni only. We've been through 10 years in the normal way and kind of break the model. The way that we do it would be different. We'd go to a new place, not do it at Aerodream. I just don't think that my back can handle sleeping on that mattress for another second, as much as I love that place, but do it just in a different format and really kind of lean heavily on the alumni. There was also something else that we were looking at doing, was actually formalizing this and creating a proper alumni organization. And this is, I think, one of the ways in terms of formalizing Blacksmith in 10 years of what we've been doing, and really to take this to the next level would actually be to create a formal alumni organization with bylaws and trustees and the sorts of things that in many respects is even how a university operates. We have a lot of ideas for that and how I think that can end up working out, but we'll save that for another time. What we really wanted to do today was just spend some time, Matt and I talk a lot, Victoria and I obviously talk a lot, and I wanted to just really spend some time addressing what I think a lot of people have some really obvious concerns right now. And we wanted to talk about that. We wanted to answer some of your questions and go through some things that we've been thinking about, which we think are really important to present right now. Matt, do you have anything you want to say sort of at the outset of this?
No, I'll just say we did get a whole bunch of people completed this survey we did, and it was really that made it clear that this was definitely worth doing. There were lots of really good questions in there, and I encourage you, if we don't answer your questions in the course of the normal conversation here, just to ask them, through this chat feature or whatever else, so that we can get to them.
Well, I'm just scrolling through right now, looking at all the faces. I didn't realize how much I missed you guys, but this is really cool. It's really great to see. Felix, I assume that that's not actually where you live, and that's some also very extravagant background, but it's really great. Very nice to see.
It's my garden, yeah.
Okay, cool. Right on. Let's go ahead and get started. I think the way we sort of designed this is just we categorized everybody's questions. Really, there were a lot of things that we wanted to say and talk about, and our comments are really fixed and categorized based on the questions you guys asked. So that's really how we'll start this out. And there were a lot of questions, I think, primarily on just general sort of culture, attitude, mental fitness right now. I know there are a lot of people that are just having a very difficult time with this. And what I would say is, at the outset of that, if you're having a difficult time right now because of the isolation and you have to stay home and all those things, I would say we haven't seen anything yet. There is a very reasonable case to be made that things could get a lot worse before they get better. And right now, nobody's really been asked to sacrifice anything. Nobody's been asked to go out and take a bullet, or go fight or actually do anything. All we've really been told is to stay home. That's it. Stay home. I mean, there are people like, I have people that I know that have been laid off, and they're disappointed about that. And they were talking to me, and I heard this story from somebody who's actually, I believe, on the line right now, and who told me that I have friends that are like taking some online quiz to guess which celebrity's boobs are fake versus real. And that's the big sacrifice. That's what they're doing right now. And so if that's kind of what we're doing, and we're just sort of staying at home, and people are like playing PlayStation and taking celebrity boob quizzes and stuff like that, and we're having a difficult time with that, I would say it's pretty imperative to cultivate some substantial mental toughness right now, because things could get a lot worse. And if you're having a total breakdown right now, at a point before things really get worse, this is really the time to dig deep, because things really could get worse. And it's a sign. If you're having a lot of difficulty right now, you really need to take steps to prepare yourself. Let me just kind of give you a few things from my view. I wrote something for our audience. Hold on, I keep admitting people.
I'll take care of that, James.
Hi, Portia. Okay, thanks. Hi, you guys that are joining us. I sent something out to my audience the other day, and I quoted a guy named Jim Stockdale. Maybe some of you guys read it, maybe you didn't. I think Stockdale is probably one of the toughest human beings who ever lived. This is a guy who was a fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy and was shot down over North Vietnam in the 1960s, and he spent 7.5 years in a Vietnamese prison camp, getting the shit beat out of him every day, being tortured, abused, put in isolation. Every terrible thing that could ever happen to a human being happened to this guy. And this guy was so tough. At a certain point, when he found out he was going to be used for propaganda purposes, he beat himself to a pulp. He slit his head open with a razor blade. He took a wooden stool and beat the shit out of his own face to bloody and bruise himself to the point that he was unrecognizable, just so that he couldn't be used as a propaganda tool. He even attempted suicide at a certain point, just to prove that he was willing to even end his own life rather than give up secrets and sell out his the other soldiers and his country and so forth. I mean, this guy was tough. And when he was asked years later, and if you guys read the book Good to Great, you would have seen this. He was asked years later, how did you deal with circumstances like that? And he said, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted not only that I would get out, but that I would prevail in the end and turn the experience into the defining event of my life, which in retrospect, I would not trade. Which is pretty amazing that somebody in that condition who had to endure that amount of pain and suffering would say, looking back, I wouldn't trade it for the world. And Stockdale went on to say, and this is really the lesson, that you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be. And that is, I think, in a nutshell, the mental toughness that I think is imperative for almost everybody to be able to cultivate. F. Scott Fitzgerald said that the test of first-rate intelligence is to be able to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time and retain the ability to function. And in a way, that's kind of what we have to do right now. We have to acknowledge the worst possible outcomes while still having the faith that we will prevail in the end, that the world is not coming to an end, that we will survive. And in the long run, good things are going to happen. But things could get really bad and really dark before that happens. And we have to, sort of retain both of those at the same time. Fitzgerald actually, in this article that he wrote, it was a series of essays. And I think the follow-on, as he was saying, as an example of this, it is accepting that there are things that you cannot change while simultaneously trying to change them, as an example of holding two opposing ideas in your mind at the same time. And that's really kind of what we're dealing with right now. I would say for everybody, this is a time where it's more important than ever to be very mindful about the things that you do, the things that you read, the people that you spend time with. If you're spending time with people if your circle right now is people that are spending their time taking online quizzes to see which celebrity boobs are fake or real, you're probably not spending time with the right people. Those are people that are going to drag you down. And it's always important to be very mindful about the circle of people that you spend your time with. I think it's even more important than ever to do that now. If you find yourself spending time with people that are maybe the opposite of that and spending all of their time indulging every possible conspiracy theory and going to the darkest place imaginable and just being, everything is just dark and negative and paranoid and so forth. It's really great to be aware of facts and keep yourself open to every possible scenario and permutation. It's another to dwell on the emotional component of that and the negativity, and that's something that can really drag you down. And I think it's more important to be more mindful than ever of who you spend your time with and the things that you're reading, the things you're looking at, and how really you're, the way that you're focusing your brain and your energy right now. Another couple of things, and I'm sure Matt's probably going to have a lot of comments on this. Honestly, it's this is not rocket science, but little routines really count a lot. I would encourage you, if you haven't seen, there's an admiral in the U.S. Navy. His name was William McRaven. He gave a really great speech to the University of Texas, I think in 2014, commencement address. And he had, the name of it is called Make Your Bed. And this guy was the Navy SEAL commander in the United States. I mean, another really tough guy. And he had this whole thing where he was talking about, if you want to change the world, make your bed. Get up every morning and make your bed. And it was this idea that if really the first thing you do in the morning is something that's productive, it's a stupid thing, right? Make your bed. But it's this productive thing that the first thing you do in the morning is something that you can actually see. It's this effort that you put into something that you can see immediate results from that is productive. That's sort of the way that you start your day. It builds a habit to productivity. And I think if Craig were here, he would probably echo this sentiment of building routine around being productive and not being fearful and not being conspiratorial and just dwelling on things that are going to drag you down and make you emotional and put you in a frenzy. Again, we're not saying shut off, facts and, of all the different permutations that are out there, but it's about cultivating the habit of maintaining productivity. Build your day around being productive. Everybody on this call has spent time doing little circles to the front. If you're not sitting in your house doing little circles to the front, you're wrong. Everybody here should be doing Punisher squats and little circles to the front. I mean, literally, I do like one day is lower body, one day is upper body. I was just doing Punisher squats. I do wind sprints on the golf course in front of my house. I have a pretty nice setup here, but I was doing, fitness is one of these things. Like there's so many things in our lives right now that we can't control. Your own personal fitness is one of the things that you can absolutely fucking control. Every single person can get up and do squats and push-ups and whatever else, whatever it is that you can do, whatever physical limitations you have, every single person can be doing this. And this is one thing that you can have that is completely under your control. And I'll tell you, you'll feel a lot better. There are plenty of studies about, the sort of mental health benefits of exercise and so forth. But in general, just cultivating habits like that to make yourself, your life more productive, really, I think goes a long way in helping to cultivate some of that mental toughness. I would also be honest with yourself about certain things when you look at your day and your habit, when we end up having these radical shifts in our lives, a lot of people tend to pick up really bad habits. I was talking to somebody recently who told me that he stopped showering because what's the point? I'm not going out anymore, so I stopped showering, right? So, it's just little things like that where we pick up some habits that may be questionable. And I think being really honest with yourself about stuff like that is one way to, again, just the idea is to really step back and try and build positive, productive habits in your life, to cut out things that are useless and negative and really only dwell on the emotional things. The emotional stuff is like, it's like a car wreck. I mean, everybody likes to drive by. We all complain about everybody that stops to stare at the car wreck, but almost everybody does it. Almost everybody does it because we like to sort of dwell on the dramatic and the negativity. And if the websites that you go to are all, and where you're sort of getting all of your news and your information is sort of that super, super negative stuff, that's going to really impact your mood and your productivity and all those things. So just be very mindful of all of that. Matt, you have anything you want to add to that?
Well, yeah, I'll just add that, you pointed out two things that are opposites. So you told people, one, not to be aloof and be, doing the boob surveys or whatever. And then the other end, don't dwell on the negative, and don't, and which kind of feels like focusing on reality right now, So I think that duality is real. Neither one of those you really want to be doing. But it is important, I think, that one of the tendencies that I've seen among really most of the people, most of my friends and most of the people I know, is that their default is to, look for the silver lining. And I think that is a remarkable human characteristic. And I love that. And honestly, the people in my life wouldn't be in my life if they didn't kind of default to that, looking at the silver lining in things. However, I think that's often done almost reflexively and not really considering, the consequences of the reality of what's going on. And I think there's lots what's happening now is for us has consequences, not just that we're all experiencing now with like the whole shelter in place stuff and stay at home orders that we have, but the consequences beyond this, I think, for the economy and socially are pretty substantial. And it's really hard to overstate what those might be. And so it's really, this is a once in a lifetime kind of experience for sure. And it has lots of significant consequences. And to pretend that it doesn't, I think you have, in order to find a silver lining, you first have to face the actual realities of the situation. And you have to go deep enough in all the negative possible outcomes of all of this. Not the why this happened or anything. And who's trying to, like, these conspiracy theories that are out there, not the why, because it doesn't really matter, but where we are today and what it might mean for our future. I mean, all of us love to travel, for instance. Travel as we know it for the foreseeable future doesn't exist. Borders are going up all over the world. They're considering, instituting borders between the states and the US. Like, those won't come down as easily as they've gone up. It took decades of, globalization to cause those to come. So like all the things that we assumed would be a certain way forever, there's no reason to think that they wouldn't, are all up for grabs. Lots of things could change and it can have lots of negative consequences. So I think it is important to monitor yourself, make sure you're not getting overwhelmed in the negative, because there's plenty of negative out there, but I think you have to face it clearly. Face that, everything that were your priorities a month ago might be totally irrelevant going forward. And it's an opportunity, though. It really is, because I mean, we have gotten kind of caught up. Everyone here can, I'm sure, acknowledge this, that we as a society, we get caught up in things that really don't matter. And I think that these kind of things actually can be really, really great for a culture. They can really help people focus on what really matters and focus on helping people. One of my favorite things is that it focuses people to focus on real world problems, not abstract problems. We were very concerned as a culture about, I'm just going to pick, and I don't have any stance on this. I'll pick one very abstract concept: climate change. Climate change. Not to say it's not a big deal, but like today, it doesn't seem like it's that important. It doesn't seem like it's as important as the fact that you might have, your neighbor might be elderly and not have somebody who to help her get food, and she could be, she needs some help, and there's something you can do in your neighborhood, and you're needed right here, right now. And so I think that the real world problems actually bring people together. Abstract problems can kind of separate them. So I think there's a real opportunity in the shift between those two, but you have to own up to the difficulty of the situation, I think, first, and then you can lift your head up and start to look at ways you can help. And I think the only way, I think it's important, James spent a lot of time thinking about possible scenarios for the future. He shared with his All Access members yesterday a bunch of different scenarios about what could happen, mostly focused on economic related things. But I think it's really important for all of us to look ahead in our own lives, in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities, in our own businesses, and try and imagine what the possible futures could look like a month, 3 months, a year from now, because some things might not come back at all the way that they were, and some things might forever change for the better. And I think that for you to put yourself in a position where you can positively affect that, you have to be looking ahead and thinking about the future. I mean, certainly everybody's business here has been affected. There's no business that hasn't been affected by this. And you just have to imagine the different scenarios going forward. So I'm a big believer in Stockdale, who was a big believer in Epictetus, of course, which was his inspiration, right. Which is that to recognize what's in your control and what's not in your control. And there's a lot that is not in our control right now, but there's a lot that is. Your own attitude and your own personal conduct is completely in your control. Taking a lot of times, I think people look at this situation and go, oh, I wish I would have done something 2 weeks ago, because if I'd been thinking better, I would have made some move 2 weeks ago. Because there's this feeling that a lot of us have in stuff like this, that it's too late for us to take action, but that's not really true. And I remember when luckily I sold most of my stocks before any of this, close to the market peak, before any of this really happened. And I was talking to a friend of mine after, the initial decline in the stock market. And he says, man, I wish I would have sold last week. And I'm like, dude, it's not too late. Like, I don't know, you think it's going to go back from here? Like, there's still time. So think about the possible futures of the world, and then reposition yourself if possible, whether it's in your portfolio, whether it's within your company. Like, make adjustments now. It's not too late. There are things that you can do, but you just have to imagine what the future might look like, and then take action today on it where you can.
Yeah, I think just to echo that point, Matt, as we talked about, the Stockdale quote, the discipline to confront circumstances, however brutal they might be. There are, if you're still finding yourself with that secret optimism where you feel like this is going to be over in 2 weeks or a month or whatever, and I just got to sort of knuckle down and deal with this, you're not thinking about it properly. It's not to say that that's not a possibility. I've been writing about this. Every possible scenario is on the table. Benevolent space aliens showing up, on the table. Every possible scenario is on the table, because everything that we ever thought was impossible, well, some of that shit's already happened. So anything can happen, including this all goes back to normal. However slight of a possibility that might be, it's still possible. But there are so many other permutations that are probably far greater than that. If you're not thinking about, like Matt was saying, all those other things, all the other different futures, and what those could look like, and your role and how you're playing, you're not going to be able to cultivate the right mental attitude with all of that. So
right, and I think the first thing before doing any specific actions is to have the right mental attitude, one where you can face what's happening and be productive. And I think that's really the main point of this first part of the conversation, is that you have to accept what is, so that you can you're empowered to do something about it for yourself and for the people you love, people around you.
Right. You have to divorce yourself from the idea that it's going to be all good and it's all going to go back to normal. You've got to recognize that there are some extremely bad possibilities. And only once you can finally internalize that, can you really start to move on and say, okay, this is what it's going to be. And I've got to survive in this. And this is one of these things that in the future, like, every single person is going to remember this. Every single person is going to remember this. And I'm talking about this later with business, but you will be remembered by other people for how you act now. This is the time to show the world who the fuck you are, what you're made of, what your morals and your principles are. being able to stand up and actually be a person of action and not, cower in fear. This is the time to show the world who you really are. And you can only do that when you can really internalize, what the different possibilities of the future might be like and what your role to play is in that. Bill, do you have anything you want to add to that in terms of just kind of cultivating the right mental attitude?
Sure.
Move in?
Yeah, look, I'm actually so proud of the music community, because when you look at creators, which reminds me of our young entrepreneurs, they're not looking at every scenario. All they're looking at is the problem in front of them, which is, I can't tour. I'm made to make music. I need to get my music out there. And the thing they did was jump online immediately. And it's not about charging for it. It's not about monetizing it. It's doing what they have to do. And so my sense is that at a very zoomed out level, we're cells. Cells either die or they multiply. And to me, that's creativity. We're all instilled with it. And part of the creativity is exactly what you guys are saying, which is spend time analyzing, looking at scenarios, whatever. Like, that's part of it. But the other part of it's creating. And it's not creating blindly optimistically, but it's creating with what we're compelled to create. And I saw a lot of questions in the sheet about, hey, which industry should I be looking at? How should I protect myself? What's going to make me rich? And I thought, I have no idea what's going to do any of that shit. But I know that if I'm inspired by creation, chances are it's a problem that's going to be on other people's minds too. And something may come out of that. But for sure, I'm going to have fun doing it along the way. So that's
Bill Silva. Wow.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining, buddy.
Music industry has, if you guys, any of you guys follow any artists, you've seen what they've done, almost automatically online. Oh, my tours got canceled. Okay, well, what are we going to do? They don't look at, they're going, well, I have fans who are expecting me, and they expect me to show up. They probably need me now more than they needed me before, and they've done stuff for it. It's actually been very, very cool to see. And I think that's, one thing that Bill says, I related to that, though, I want to, about the, the questions about, where's the opportunity? Where's the opportunity to get rich and stuff like that from this? And listen, in every crisis, there's opportunity. That's true. That's true. But I can tell you I know a lot of the people on this call have never really been through any even real substantial market downturn. And I can tell you, when the opportunities are really there, you don't want anything to do with them. Like, you're so disgusted with everything that the last thing you want to do is look at your stock portfolio. The last thing you're looking at is what trade to put on. You're just disgusted by it. You're sick to your stomach with it. That's blood in the streets. Is not when the market goes down. Blood in the streets is when the stomach and people feel so sick about how awful things are that people are paralyzed and are unable to move. And that's not, at least in the public markets, we're not even close to that. We're not even close to that kind of a bottom. I mean, it's nothing. Most retail investors are still in.
Yeah. Buying the dip. Yeah. Okay. Another question we got from a lot of people: my business is in trouble. What do I do? Well, hate to tell you this. If your business is in trouble, there's not really there's no secret playbook to say, like, here's the 3 steps to, getting your business back together, in the midst of this pandemic. I mean, that's just fucking stupid. It just doesn't exist. Your business, and if you think your business is not in trouble, maybe it's not, and that could be right. But for example, Victoria and I heard from somebody in one of our portfolio companies who told us that as long as everything stays the way it is, we should be fine for the next, however many months. And I'm like, these guys don't get it, because it's not going to stay the way that it is. I mean, you've got to be able to suffer in not necessarily every industry. Obviously, there are always exceptions, but I think in a lot of industries, you got to be able to suffer a 50% or more decline in revenue. And so people are kind of looking and saying, like, oh, well, I think we're pretty okay right now. Well, no, bullshit. If you can't suffer a 50% decline in revenue, then you might not be in trouble right now, but you sure as shit probably will be, in over the next couple of months. If you can't deal with a 50% decline in revenue, you need to start thinking about that now. What does that mean? And I think if you're in trouble, and it doesn't mean that you're going to go under, but if you're in trouble, the first thing you've got to do is be honest and transparent with all of your stakeholders. And that's, I mean, first of all, yourself, because as an entrepreneur, when you start a business from scratch and it's your baby, it's this thing that you've given life to and you've put so much of yourself, you don't even want to believe it. You think, no, it's going to be fine. And we have this thing again, it's that human optimism and hope inside of us where we want to feel like it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I'll figure out a way. You got to be honest with yourself first. You have to be honest with your employees. These people have made a commitment to you. And as a leader, you have a commitment to them. You need to be honest with your employees. You need to be honest with your shareholders, your investors, your lenders, your suppliers, anybody that basically has anything to do with your business. You need to be very candid with everyone to say, whatever the situation is, we're okay now, but down the road, I'm not sure. If revenues decline by 50%, I'm not sure we're going to make it. And start thinking through, what does that mean? Does that mean you're going to go under? Does it mean that, you might have to cut salaries? You're going to stop certain payments. You're going to suspend, whatever, paying interest on debts, whatever it is. You need to think through that shit now. Gesundheit. You need to think through that stuff now, and and be very candid with everybody. And the reason why now, one is because it's the right thing to do, and two, because everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows. So it's not like this is going to come as a surprise to anybody. And this is really, in a way, your one opportunity where you can shoot that bullet. And, what does anybody expect right now? If somebody invested in your company and you're going to say, hey, look, I don't know if we're going to survive this. What are they going to do? We actually had this, this company that we ended up taking over. And we had just recently entered into, a lease in North Chicago, of all places, because it's an opportunity zone, and for tax purposes, it was very beneficial to the company. And frankly, the company's in good shape. We can go down to zero revenue, and we'll be fine because there's no cost to the business right now. We basically cut the cost down to zero, and that was all Victoria's doing, by the way, to give credit where credit is due. And it was so funny because we sent an email. We just signed this lease, and the lease was nothing. It was like I don't know, it was like, what is it, $1,400 a month or something like that. And we emailed the guy and said, yeah, we're not going to pay this anymore, just FYI. And the guy was like, oh, well, I'm going to go talk to my lawyer. We'll figure, whatever. And I'm like, oh, look at the special guy who thinks that he's the only one who's not going to take a loss in this whole pandemic. I mean, it's amazing that I was flabbergasted by this, that somebody actually thought that he was special, and his shithole little hole-in-the-wall property in North Chicago was somehow exempt from the pandemic that's taking over, the rest of the world. It was completely ridiculous. The reality is that almost nobody is going to have that view, and everybody's going to understand. So this is really the time where you have the opportunity to be very straightforward and honest with people about it. And, I would also say that if you have shareholders, and this is real, I would never in a million years have anything to do with this business. It's so small, but I watch over it because there are shareholders in it. And these shareholders are people that I care about. These are people that follow me. And that's literally the only reason why I ever pay attention to this business. Craig and I both, Valentine and I both put, I think, like $100,000 in this a couple of years back. And I would have walked away from that a long time ago, were it not for the fact that other people put money in this. And so we've been sort of nursing this back to health. And now it's actually quite a nice business, but it's still fairly small, and we wouldn't be involved otherwise. But this is the thing now where not only do we have an obligation to be transparent with everybody, including some, jackass guy who owns a little hole in the wall place in North Chicago, to be transparent with that guy. But I feel like as well, especially if you have shareholders, regardless of what your views are politically or otherwise, you have an obligation to take every subsidy, stimulus package, whatever, and every certainly developed world is rolling this stuff out. Whether you're in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, England, in the United States, everybody's got this stuff all over the world now. And if especially you have shareholders, I think you have a fiduciary obligation to take whatever assistance you can get your hands on, and yeah, just be absolutely.
As long as it doesn't compromise your other decision making, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There may be costs associated with it. So, for example, in the United States, they are going out and saying, "Hey, we'll give you free money, basically, to keep certain employees, to pay your employees, but you're not allowed to let anybody go." And so this creates a little bit of a moral quandary, because now it's like, well, there was this guy I wanted to fire because he was a non-performer, but now I can't fire him if I take the money, right? So it's things like that. You have to make sure that other decisions aren't compromised as a result of that, but you at least have an obligation to take those things under serious consideration. So number one, be honest with your stakeholders, all stakeholders, and be honest now. If you hide the truth, or you try and tell everybody, hey, it's all good, we're all fine, nothing's going to happen, and then 6 months from now, you have to send them an email and say, oh, sorry, we're going to go under. Not only are you going to look like an idiot, but you're going to look completely disingenuous that you are hiding the truth, and people are going to be a lot more angry down the road because of this. So this is actually the time to take the opportunity to be as bleak as you can be about what the future might look like, because I would say be more bleak, and then that way you're in a way sort of under promising, and then you can over deliver on the results later. Say, hey, it wasn't as bleak as I thought, and we're actually in a better position right now. So
well, there's
number
so much we
two,
don't know.
again,
It could get worse. And so if you take a big assumption now, and I think one of the biggest things you have to realize that, so, we had, coming into the new year with our business, we had a certain plan. There was built on a whole set of assumptions and a business history and lots of different things. So we had a plan, and I assume all of you was the same way. You had basically at least a thumbnail sketch of a plan you were operating from. You should be rethinking that all from the ground up today, because there are a lot of assumptions that are baked into what we did before. Maybe it's low interest rates, maybe it was access to certain talent. By the way, there's going to be if you're looking to make your team better by hiring remarkable people, this is going to be one of the best hiring opportunities over the next year of my lifetime, where there's going to be amazing people that get dislocated in this, and they're going to be available. So it's not all bad, there's good things that can come out of this, but you have to revisit all of your core assumptions in your plan for what your business does in the future. And it might be something like, maybe you pivot a little bit. I hear these very limited situations where, like, a distillery, switches up what they're doing so that they're producing hand sanitizer. So they go from producing whiskey to hand sanitizer.
Yeah, I would just, on that point, it's funny, Matt, because this is actually my bullet point number 3, but Cliff, and you guys know Cliff, he runs the company in Australia. We're going to be making masks, as part of that. So, instead of making ladies apparel and all that, we're going to be cranking out masks like crazy, because that's actually part of it. Pivot if you can, if it makes sense. Not just because it makes financial sense, because in many respects, it might also make you part of the solution. And, and that's, I think if you can be part of the solution, that makes a lot of sense. And there are a lot of ways, for people to be part of the solution. And when we've got, we happen to be lucky enough to have a lot of the equipment to be able to do so.
On the mask thing, I have to say this because I've been saying this now for 2 months, and I want more people to hear it. There's going to be a high-end fashion company producing masks. It's going to be a huge opportunity, just because, like, everyone's going to wear masks, and then it's going to be more common in the winter in the US like it is in Asia during flu season for people to wear masks. Yep. And people are going to want to differentiate. And so I think Prada as a mask,
Matt,
and there's brand opportunity there for sure.
Just give a shout out. Matt wrote a really nice piece about this. And he had photos. I don't know where you found these, but pictures from like 100 years ago after the Spanish flu. And for a long time, people wore masks. That was just sort of a normal thing. You saw people go out in public and they just wore masks. And that could totally be a thing. That could totally be a thing where we see people just sort of a normal thing. People walking around the mall, people walking around in airports. You see that a lot in Asia, but you don't see it in the West. You don't see people in Canada and Spain, whatever, wearing masks at the airports. You will now.
It's also a privacy. It's also a privacy thing where there's no privacy in the world anymore. Actually, it gives you cover for privacy, which is kind of nice. People like me, I like that. But yeah, I think actually, I one of my favorite ones was it was a graduate. It was from a yearbook from this little town in Colorado, from the graduating class of 1919, and they're all sitting there as a class wearing masks.
Yeah,
that's how weird the world can be.
So it goes back to kind of what we were saying at first about imagining all these different scenarios and permutations in the world. I mean, you have to imagine not just economic and financial and business changes, but even basic social trends. And, are people going to be, across Latin America, we're going to be kissing each other as much as we used to? Are we even going to be shaking hands anymore? All that sort of stuff. a lot of these things that might go away. And so, you know, with respect to your business, yeah, if there's a way for you to pivot into something that might make sense in the way that you might see the world unfolding in the future, that not only makes financial sense, but also helps you be part of the solution, that's great. And that's something that, again, your stakeholders, your investors, your employees, et cetera, I think would probably be really excited to get behind. So one, be honest, absolutely candid, even go out of your way to paint a even more bleak picture than what you feel like is necessary. Number two, use every means at your disposal to work it out. There are a lot of places right now in a lot of countries where they're saying, you don't have to pay your rent, you don't have to pay your mortgage, you don't have to pay your loans, you don't have to pay, you know, a lot of these things. So you might actually find when you factor in all that stuff, and if you talk to your employees and maybe people agree to take certain pay cuts, you might actually be able to survive, you know, a 50, 60, 80% decline in revenue, but you have to be smart about it. Again, pivot if you can, if it makes sense. And number four, I would say if you need to raise cash, it is possible. I mean, there are people that are raising money right now. Just don't be a moron about it. If you need to raise cash right now out of desperation, don't be a moron. Check your ego. Don't be, you know, oh, I have the greatest business in the world and I'm not going to give up, you know, all this stuff. You're going to have to give up, especially if it's out of desperation. You're going to have to give up. There are ways to craft deals right now where you can create a win-win. You can create a win-win for, you know, you, for your current investors, for your investors that are coming in. You could create a certain deal. For example, if you need to bring in capital, you could create a new class of shares for new investors that come in. And those shares might have certain terms. They might have a preferred dividend so that they get a dividend before anybody else. Maybe that dividend is fixed, you know, maybe it floats. But maybe they get a preferred dividend before anybody else. Maybe those shares, you know, entitle them obviously to a greater share of the dividend or a greater share of the profits or a greater share of the company's upside. But at a certain point, maybe that upside is capped where you say, okay, you know what, after you've made 10 times your money, we're going to reduce your share and take care of some of the original investors. So there are certain provisions that you could put into raising capital, into new share classes, that if you've got a good business and you've got good management and you're smart about going out and raising money. And by the way, maybe you're raising money because, you know, like Matt was talking about, and I agree with this entirely, you know, there is rock star talent out there right now that's just sitting on the sidelines. There are really great people that just got laid off. And if you really want to take your business to the next level, bringing on some capital to be able to do that, to have some working capital, to hire new people, you know, I think, you know, even Mark and I were talking about this, you know, with our agriculture company, we're looking around, we're seeing a lot of guys, a lot of farmers that were too heavily in debt. They're not going to make it. You know, we could really increase the size of this business, you know, and that's something that's really exciting, and bring on new people and so forth. So there are actually opportunities for not desperation capital, but growth capital. But, you know, whatever deal it is that you strike, again, you've got to really check your ego, but be creative with it and come up with a lot of ways to say, okay, let's think long-term about this over the next 5 years, 10 years, et cetera. You know, if you get this, would you be satisfied if you made X times your money? And once you made X times your money, would you be willing to come down a little bit? So you get, you know, maybe first rights on this, first rights on that, you get the highest liquidation preference. But down the road, perhaps you would give back some of those shares, or the company would buy out a portion of your shares or something like that. So there are ways to structure a capital raising deal right now that doesn't result in a permanent loss of value or permanent dilution to existing shareholders or even to yourself. So you have to be creative about these sorts of deals, but also don't be so arrogant and stubborn. If you need money and there's somebody that comes along and is willing to give you money, you got to take the deal. And not, you owe it at a minimum. You owe it to at least consider to your employees, because if you don't, then there's going to be a lot of people that you know, their life is going to get a lot worse because you were too pig-headed, you know, to take somebody's deal where they, you know, very generously offered to give you money in a time of desperation. So those are sort of things I would consider if your business is in trouble right now: being honest, doing whatever you got to do to work it out, pivot if you can and it makes sense. And again, just don't be a jackass if you need to raise money. Be creative, come up with a win-win deal. Don't just do some standard thing. There are a lot of ways to structure a deal that ensures that people get what they want. You can get what you want. If you believe in abundance and that the pie long-term can be really big, it's a really big pie to split. There are a lot of creative ways to do that.
I would just encourage people to go ahead and enter any questions they have into that group chat, just so we can make sure that within the time we have, we kind of steer the conversation toward whatever topics are most urgent or interesting to you?
Yeah, there's only really two more things here, I think, in general, in terms of broad categories. Number one, number three here. So number one was, cultivating kind of mental attitude. Number two is, what do I do if my business is in trouble? Number three is, how do I market right now? What's the right way to market? In general, I would say that, if you're marketing, there's nothing wrong with marketing. That shouldn't be taboo. You shouldn't really feel like you shouldn't be marketing right now because of this. But my very dear friend who's on this call, Dr. Mike, sent me this thing. I don't know if you guys can see this. It says, "Fight the virus together with Monex Boom." If you don't know what Monex Boom is, this is basically a financial services company. And I looked at this, I couldn't believe it when Mike sent this to me. I'm like, you just got to be fucking kidding me. Like, who do these assholes think they are? Fight the virus together with your brokerage account. I mean, seriously, right? So this is so tone deaf. This is so pathetic that they would do something like this. And this is what I was saying earlier. You will be remembered for how you act now. The things that you do, the way that you carry yourself. If you're somebody that's just constantly in a panic and you can't keep it together, you'll be remembered for that. If you're the business that goes out and puts this shit out there on Instagram and says, fight the virus with your brokerage account, you're going to be remembered for that shit. And shame on these people. Shame on them for something that's this callous and this tone deaf and this ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense. What are you going to do with your brokerage account to fight the virus? This is so stupid. So you will absolutely be remembered.
Contrast that with what Bill was talking about with the artists, where the first act is like they want to create and they want to be generous, and that activity it's certainly the artists do it. It makes you think of them more. Maybe you end up streaming their music more, so maybe they end up getting a bigger cut of a little slice later. But they're not even acting in that way or thinking about that. They're thinking about creating. They're thinking about their fans, and they're thinking about within what they do, within their skill set, what can they do to help? And if your right. marketing is not reflective of that in one way, shape, or another, it'll be obvious to everybody. And if you're cynically trying to use it like that case, I think it will definitely work against you in the long term. Short term, you maybe get a little bump in conversions, but long term, it's a huge mistake.
Yeah, long term, shame on you. And here's like some examples, I think, of like good marketing and bad marketing. If you have a super valuable product right now that people really need, let's say you're the guy with like crates and crates of hand sanitizer. Nobody's going to know about it unless you actually engage in marketing. Like, you have to actually tell people that, hey, I have this hand sanitizer. Before, or toilet paper, or whatever the currency of the apocalypse is today, whatever it is that you have that people really need, you have to market you have to tell people about it, right? If you're marketing because you think, shit, I got to get some money in the door, otherwise my business is going to go under, that's going to be marketing out of desperation, and you're going to be making claims and making promises that will never stack up. And that's going to be the thing that you're going to be remembered for. You're going to be remembered as being, the false idol, fake guru, type marketing. Suddenly everybody's a coronavirus expert. Everybody's out on the internet, talking about, all this sort of stuff about the corona. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. If you're doing desperation marketing because you feel like you're short of cash and your business is going to go under otherwise, I would just say, go back to the previous discussion, be honest with yourself and say, well, I'm finished. It was good while it lasted, but I should have probably prepared better or been in a better position. Don't take it out on your customers. Don't take your failure to prepare out on your customers. So, as a marketing approach, I think in general, again, if you've got a legit product, I also think, by the way, this is the time where, and you'll be remembered for this is the time where you should be giving more stuff away. Just again, like the musicians and so forth, people are doing this. And yeah, it's easy to say Justin Bieber can probably afford to give more away for free than the average guy, and perhaps the average small business owner. But in general, you have to go into it with the attitude of, how can I help? Because your business in general should revolve around that fundamental question. How can I help? What are the problems that I can solve for my employees, for my customers, for my employees, for my stakeholders? What is the value that I can create? And not, shit, I don't have enough money to pay the rent. What can I, how can I squeeze a couple of bucks out of this crisis so that I can extend my, you know, my poor planning another month. So
Well,
this is, you know, good marketing versus bad marketing.
And James, what you're talking about though, this is what every business should be doing anyway. I mean,
That's right.
the great thing about circumstances like this is that, you know, it's a big emperor has no clothes moment for lots of people in the world, for the leadership who are feckless, and for you potentially as a business owner to demonstrate, you know, whether, you know, where you really are on that. And if you aren't really creating real value in the world, as the tide recedes, you don't survive in that environment. You know what I mean? You're with the value that you might be bringing, your business might be bringing to the world. If it's not substantial enough, then, you know, you get washed away. Like
this is a great point, because this is exactly why in the long run, recessions and depressions and these things are actually good. Is because all the shit businesses, all the people that should have never been in business to begin with, they all get washed away. The people that survive are the ones that were actually creating value the whole time, and they come out of it stronger because they have more market share, they have more customers, they have all these things, and they end up in a much better position. And all the scumbags that were out fleecing everybody and selling snake oil, those guys get washed away and they're finished. And so if you're somebody who's actually, go ahead, Matt.
Or maybe someone who just could succeed on good technique, you know, maybe your business, your good marketing technique or something like that. You know, really efficient operations or whatever, like those things don't, technique doesn't work. It goes back to the fundamentals. It's like, are you actually creating value for the world? If your business is about trying to create value for people, then that value is seen and obvious. It doesn't need to be twisted and, you know, constricted in certain ways. And I think that, you know, so much of, because we've lived in, I mean, the last 10 years has been this crazy thing, crazy market. I mean, where everything, there's been so much money and it's hard to fail, actually. Been really hard to fail, and I think it's a lot of stuff.
Companies that perennially hemorrhage cash and have no hope of ever turning a profit have been very successful over the last several years. So that model is finished. That's done, right?
For now,
and
it may come back later.
Yeah, it may come back later. But for now, yeah, those guys are screwed. And yeah, in the long run, it's great businesses with great people, you know, people of integrity managing wonderful companies who are actually creating real value in the world are going to be the ones that do very well. And so if you have to market, if you need to market, if, you know, I think you should be giving away as much as you can for free. You know, and if you're going to be marketing, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But, you know, you got to be really cautious about your tone and the way that you're presenting yourself. And I think it's more time than ever to just really reach out and make a very deep and personal connection, because everybody's feeling the same pain. Everybody in the world is dealing with the same fears and the same uncertainties. And, you know, whatever, you know, the mental issues with the isolation, the lack of socializing and all that sort of stuff, everybody's feeling the same stuff, you know, and depending that, you know, you're above it and, you know, all these sorts of, it's just, it's a bad approach. It's really to reach out and have a very deep and close personal connection with everybody. Just be brutally honest. I think honesty is always great, and being brutally honest, you know, this is a great time, I think, to do that. In a marketing approach, again, as long as you're doing something that really, truly is something that's very valuable and creates a lot of value for people, you know, this is something that makes a lot of sense. Bill, do you have anything to add to that before we move on to the last one? Okay. So the last one, we had a lot of questions about personal finance. And I would say for most people, Matt said something earlier I think is so true. Given the average age of, let's say, our Blacksmith Liberty and Entrepreneurship Camp, brought to you by Sovereign Academy, alumni is like young enough that a lot of people don't even have a recollection of the last crisis. I mean, there are people on this call that were, I mean, you know, basically still children during the last financial crisis and don't really have much of a recollection or what it was like. And there is the need, a lot of people on this call, and one of the things that I really like and respect about this group is that people are naturally independent thinkers, you know, kind of a little bit skeptical, a bit contrarian, you know, and I like that. I respect independent thinking, whether or not I agree with it. I respect anybody that actually, you know, learns and studies and forms their own opinion on things, regardless of whether or not I agree with it. And that's a lot of people in this group, in this audience. And I really respect that. And because of that, I know there are a lot of people that are thinking the market's crashed, and so there's a lot of opportunities. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities. you should not feel rushed. I did an hour and 20-minute presentation to some of my subscribers yesterday about this. You just shouldn't feel rushed into doing anything. If you're feeling rushed, it's probably because you're feeling emotional, and emotional decisions are bad decisions, especially when it comes to your money. If you're making emotional decisions about your money and your investments, that's a great way to lose a lot of money. So you just shouldn't really be in a rush to do anything. Short term, especially, short term, long term, things could go in any direction. We could see a huge rise in asset prices for a number of different reasons, because the central banks are printing a lot of money, whatever, who knows? We could see deflation, we could see a collapse in asset prices. There are so many different permutations here. So, anybody that says, here's exact, I know what's going to happen next is so full of shit. And, probably goes back to the last conversation about bad marketing. So you shouldn't really be in a rush to do anything. And there are a lot of opportunities, and I think you've got plenty of time. If you just go back to the last crisis, by the way, it took 6 months from the initial shock, 18 months from the peak for the market to actually find its bottom. So let's say 6 to 18 months, and that was in the last crisis.
And at the same time, CNBC viewership hit a low. Like, no one wanted anything to do with stocks then. Like, you can look at the CNBC ratings alone and know whether or not it's a time to get into the market. If they're high, you probably should stay out. It's when they're really low that it's a better time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So there are a lot of things that people could get into, but it should also be things that you understand. Like, Matt and I were talking about something, related to, trading Eurodollars, buying put options on Eurodollar futures, long dated out of the money Eurodollar futures. And if you don't know what that means, then you shouldn't fucking do it.
And if you do know what it is, you probably shouldn't do it either, but
it's everybody here is good at something, right? Everybody here, like whatever it is, selling stuff on Amazon, real estate, whatever it is, you're going to probably be able to find opportunities in the thing that you know really well. Yes. And there are certain of us who know finance really well, who know even very complicated, very sophisticated financial instruments. And that's the shit that we know really well. And there are other things that, you probably know really well related to your business. If Billy's on the line, like Billy knows, restaurants and B&Bs in rural Alaska really well. And my guess is that Billy's probably going to find some really interesting opportunities related to, that sort of stuff, whatever, even different general real estate opportunities in rural Alaska really well. And like, Billy probably shouldn't be trying to get into some super sophisticated financial instrument, that he's going to have to learn a whole lot about, to get into, et cetera, that doesn't really understand the upside, downside. It's no offense to anything. To Matt's point, it's like, there's risk in everything, regardless of, whatever it is that you do or don't do. Even if you understand the stuff really well, there's probably, reasons to not do it. Goes back to that F. Scott Fitzgerald quote. You have to be able to understand both the upside and the downside. And my staff and I have been sort of playing devil's advocate with one another, saying, well, here's all the reasons why we should do it, and here's all the reasons why we shouldn't get into this, specific instrument or trade. But I think the bottom line is just to, I think, generally answer the question. Don't be in a rush to do anything with your money right now at all. Just really take plenty of time to, think about yourself, cultivate that mental toughness, recognize that this is going to be a long haul. If you have employees, this is the time to step up and be a leader. And not just for your employees, but even for your friends, for your family, people that are going to, be the rock that everybody else can rely on. That's way more important than how can I make money right now? Because you're going to be able to make money tomorrow. You're going to be able to make money next month. You're going to be able to make money in December. There will be opportunities until the end of time. And, if we just look back to the last one, again, that sort of dislocation and fragmentation of the market lasted for a really long time. So don't feel like, you've got to rush in and do anything right away. Just take the time, get yourself together, make sure that you can keep it together, that your family, your employees is able to keep it together, that your business is able to survive, that they're taking all the, the help that you can, you're being transparent with everybody, you're taking care of your customers, all that stuff. And then, okay, sure, where are the right opportunities? And those will continue to surface over time, but do not be in a rush to do anything with your money unless it just seems so obvious. And even then, you should still be able to think of at least a dozen reasons why you shouldn't do it, because that's really the environment that we're in right now.
My view on everything that I've done financially in the last 60 days has been insurance based. So I've been just in case something went bad in a different one area or another. So, so I haven't been looking at it like an opportunity. I mean, I did put on something that's like a doomsday trade that has done amazingly well for me, but I was done as insurance. I didn't want it to go well. Like, it's one of those things, if it goes well, that's bad. It's bad for other assets I own. It's bad for everything, but it's just insurance. And so I think that,
well, it's funny you mentioned that. Like, gold is kind of one of those things, because people are like, oh, the gold price could go to $10,000 and we can make so much money. And I'm like, if the gold price goes to $10,000, yeah, like, I don't want to live in a world where the gold price is $10,000, because it means that so many other bad things have happened before the gold price goes to $10,000. So
right. So so the choice is to buy something like gold is basically as insurance in case a whole other set of problems occur. But like, we're not rooting for the gold price to go up. I mean, it's not good if it goes up, especially to those levels. I mean, which, who knows what will happen. I think James is totally right about all this. Because we have no idea exactly how things are going to end up. And so your choices should be about trying to make sure that you expand your ability to make choices in the future. Like I told from basically the beginning of February, I told my family, I was harassing them about just going and buying a little extra food to keep in the house. Like, there's no downside. And they're like, for what? I'm like, oh, seriously, it can't hurt you.
Yeah. I had the same conversation with people in early February. And I mean, even my chef, and that turned into a whole thing. But yeah, it's the skepticism is certainly subsided now. And now the argument is trying to explain to people, guys, this could last a really long time, because people still want to believe like, oh, it's going to be over in 2 weeks. Like, no, probably not going to be over in 2 weeks.
Right.
Anyways, Bill, did you have anything you wanted to add to the finance stuff before we kind of go on to questions? No? How do we do questions? How to do
people have typed
like
some stuff into the chat.
I kind of want to do live questions. What do you like hear?
Yeah, we can just do live if you want. You can guys unmute yourselves.
Or you can just unmute yourself.
Oh, there you go. Look at that. David Hernandez. First question.
So if you want to call, like, if people
how about if you want a question, just wave, and then like we can like call on you then. There's literally nobody waving that I can see, only on one screen. Hi, Laura, what's up?
I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you, and it's very good to see you guys.
Oh,
great to see you.
Nice to see you too. I think I unmuted Laura.
Hey guys, I just wanted to
What's
ask
up?
where Bill is. It looks fantastic.
That's Bill's fake background.
I'm in Los Angeles, but I'm using a virtual background. I could do a different one if you like.
No, good.
It looks a little bit ominous, Bill. We need something more positive and uplifting.
It's a sunrise.
Okay, I see Roberto waving here. Hold
Okay,
on.
Roberto. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hello guys, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, awesome. Thanks a lot for this opportunity, first of all. It's nice seeing you again after all these months, even under these difficult circumstances. So my question is this. I try to keep like my input from all this stuff in a minimum level in order not to get crazy and depressed about all this stuff. But still, I mean, we need to have some kind of input and information coming in so we can be up to date and stuff. My question is, which sources and how do you sort out your sources in order to get like valuable information and updated statistics and stuff about all this situation and not get your head messed up from the news and social media and all this stuff? Thanks.
I kind of follow the Nassim Taleb approach. Honestly, I try and tune out as much of that shit as possible. And, you know, it's like, it's porn, basically. It's something that can be so addictive, and you can just get so sucked into it. And I think if you find yourself doing that, especially before you go to bed, that's a terrible habit to get into, by the way. Looking at coronavirus porn before you go to bed, like it's just gonna mess up your sleep habits and everything. But the Nassim Taleb approach, you know, he used to write about this, and he would say, you know, like he said, I just don't watch the news, you know. And the reality is, if there's something that's really big, you know, I'm probably going to hear about it, because like people are going to call me, they're going to be like, hey, did you hear about this? something that's really big, like I will probably hear about it. So I might not really be the right guy to ask because I view a lot of sources of information with skepticism. If there's something that I really want to know, I usually just call people that I know and who have visibility in that country or in that industry or whatever, and I ask them straight up, what do you think is happening? But I wouldn't say there's outside of the Wall Street Journal, honestly, I wouldn't say there's like some like website that I go to get the facts. But I might be the wrong guy to ask that question to.
I think that I consume enormous amounts of news. I always have my entire life. I can't help it. It doesn't affect me. It seems like in the way it really hurts other people. Like I love data points. I love seeing things and trying to develop my own hypothesis about the way things work. But I think, and there are others that are pretty good aggregators of like that they can see, they can consume without it necessarily affecting them, and they can. A good editor essentially can do this. And there are some people that do it, but it depends usually on the subject matter. Like if you want on the disease itself, there are a number of people that are really good at pulling together lots of different information and presenting it. People who all have the the educational foundation for that. But I think the biggest thing is that if anything that is attention-oriented news, that where it's those ad-driven news is always, I think you have to be highly suspicious of it. I think instead it's better to find individuals that where they stand on things basically, and that they don't have any vested interest in just making sure that you're glued to the television, or they're not trying to push any sort of political agenda. I mean, it's one of the saddest things about all of this is that immediately people try and put it in some like, either orange man bad or Trump is the savior narrative, and it's just so useless. It doesn't work. It doesn't help. So I think, and the traditional news always does that. For me,
like just as an example, anything like related to the virus or the disease, I actually hired a guy who's a medical doctor. He's an infectious disease specialist. So this is sort of his field, and like I just put this guy on my payroll. And he sends me academic studies and, filters that stuff out and kind of helps me understand what it means. So it's more science and fact-based. Because when I'm naturally skeptical of news and reporters anyways, because they don't necessarily have they don't have an understanding of the stuff that they report on for the most part. It doesn't take anything away from them. And that's fine when it's, we're talking about, there's a traffic accident down the road or, these sorts of things. But we're talking about very specialized, technical, scientific, financial, these sorts of things. A lot of them are just out of their depth, and they just a lot of times repeat the same thing over and over again. So in that respect, my information sources come from literally academic studies that have been filtered by a guy who has 35 years of experience in the, in infectious disease. So
yeah, ultimately it comes down to, I think that's the same thing for everybody though. Find individuals out there who you trust and who you think don't have, they either don't have an agenda or their agenda is well understood, and, and use them essentially as filters for information. I think it's way better than trying to, if you don't feel comfortable consuming it all yourself. I always have probably 100 or 200 news stories a day, always have my entire life. That's why I bought N95 masks on January 17th. So.
You've always been, as long as I've known Matt, he's always, from the first time I ever met Matt, many moons ago. I remember one of the first things Matt ever told me was like, I'm a total news junkie.
I read the most obscure stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. It helps.
Okay, Felix has a question.
Yes, hello everybody. It's funny that you mentioned, James, that you are now starting to produce masks. And I hear this story all over the place. So it seems like every textile company is producing masks, and I think it's awesome. And the question I have is, what are the other companies doing? How are successful companies adapting that are not able to produce masks or are not able to produce disinfectants? So it would be interesting for me to know, so what are your other businesses doing? And also I think it would be a great initiative for successful companies also to show how they are adapting, that are not able to do to produce things that we need right now, like masks or disinfectants.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I would first I would put it back to you and ask you. You don't have to tell me now, but I mean, this is something that you can be thinking about, and what could you be doing, if anything? And the reality is that some people just can't. There's not really anything in their business that might lend itself to a pivot or some kind of solution. For myself, and for the stuff that I'm involved in, yeah, in Australia, like I said, Cliff and I are. We're going to be making masks along with our normal product. If people still want to buy that stuff, they can. But we're going to be making masks.
Go high end. Go high end. I'm telling you, high end.
No, exactly. Super high end. Niche sort of stuff. But it's the kind of thing that I think people want and need right now. With with our agriculture company, we're harvesting right now. We're producing food, which last time I checked is something that the world really fucking needs right now. So we are actually literally today harvesting. Marco sent me, probably 30 photos and videos out at one of our farms, and we're harvesting walnuts, and I'm really proud that we're able to do that. With my bank, we are. I think actually this is a whole knock-on effect, but I think that a lot of banks are going to be in a world of hurt. I think when you've got $250 trillion in global debt, and even a small portion of that gets wiped out, a small portion of that is defaulted on, it's going to be the banks that take it in the teeth. And what I feel like our service is to provide extremely, just great service, transparency, and an incredible, unparalleled level of safety, for people's money at a time when it's difficult to have a lot of trust in any counterparty, let alone your financial counterparty. And in our publishing business, I feel like my responsibility is just to help people keep it together. I mean, we're not marketing right now. We haven't been. We've been trying to give away just as much as possible. I've told our team, like, I'm not concerned about the money. I'm not concerned about any of that. I've had to kind of calm them down and say, it's going to be fine. And, just sort of try and be a leader for the team. Which is, by the way, something that you can always, it's huge value, if nothing else, just being a leader, being that rock for other people in your organization. But again, I feel like my role with the publishing company is just to help. There are a lot of people that are afraid and have a tough time dealing with uncertainty, and just helping people, sort out a lot of those issues, things like that. That's the role that, that we're playing. So, and those sort of four major businesses that I'm involved in, that's really what we're doing. But everybody's going to have their own story and ways that you might be able to do something. And if not, that's okay too. I think the biggest part about being part of the solution is also not being part of the problem, and, not being reckless and irresponsible, and, I think in helping your employees. Oh, by the way, something I thought of earlier, if you do end up marketing, do me a favor, please do the world a favor. Don't tell your customers to wash their fucking hands. Not to say that people shouldn't be washing their hands, but just, I swear to God, if I get one more email, I got an email
Patronizing
from,
thing.
yeah, it's the most patronizing thing. I mean, again, it's like, it's like all these people from just the most obscure companies. I mean, guys that like make like microphones and stuff like this, saying like, make sure you wash your hands. It's like, okay, Dad, I got it. Okay. So
It's like when Donald Trump tells you to wash your hands.
it just, that feels creepy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, everybody's going to have a different story about what you might or might not be able to do. But it's really, I think, fundamentally a question for you of what you might be able to do. And, if there's not, then that's okay. It doesn't mean that you can't still have a business. There's going to be plenty of businesses that don't have anything to do with the pandemic, and they're still going to be fine. They're still going to be successful, and, whatever. But I mean, any little small role, I mean, like Bill was talking about earlier, just a guy, who's able to sit down and play the guitar and bring a little bit of joy in people's lives, for 4.5 minutes. That's valuable, and it's cool, and it's just a nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah, I think there's a few trends that I think are interesting. If just when I think about from an entrepreneurial perspective, that I find, I think that it could be really big. I definitely think masks, high-end masks, I'm telling you, can be big. Someone's gonna make $1 billion making high-end masks. It'll probably end up being Prada or someone like that, or Louis Vuitton gets it, but big opportunity there. I think that there's a big opportunity in self-administered diagnostics. There's already been a big move to that, from the quantified self movement that never really got any really big traction. I have a little kit where I can, you know, check the ketones in my blood with a pinprick. Already, you know, there's a new company that, you know, they have, that's been around for a while, but, I mean, well, this technology's been around for a while, but it's a new company doing this, where you basically, you know, by taking a urine sample, it can tell you all these things within your, you know, within your biology, like things that could be you're low in iron or whatever. And I just think that that's kind of been on the fringe, but I think that actually, that kind of thing is going to become more common and more widespread. It's going to, in fact, be mandated in a lot of places that people have, you know, kind of proof that you don't have the virus. That'll be a thing. You'll see it, unfortunately. And I think that'll encourage like this other, you know, consumer-driven diagnostic stuff you can do on your own. So I think that's an interesting trend. I think the homeschooling thing is amazing, actually. Like if there's, I mean, my kids go to a really good private school, but it's really obvious that school is totally optimized for childcare completely. You know, my kids are able to do all the work that they're supposed to get done in the day in less than 90 minutes. And they still have the entire rest of the day. Basically, it's for, you know, self-directed learning. It's been great for them. It's been great for my neighborhood too. I didn't know there were other kids in my neighborhood. Now they're everywhere. Now they're outside with their families. Social distancing, of course, but they're out there. And so like serving that group, which has always been a fringe, weird group, I think, especially if unemployment goes up, because, you know, part of it is you send kids to school for childcare, but, you know, maybe you question it under a new world where it feels maybe more risky to send your kids to school. So
I think in general as well, I mean, there's so many of these opportunities, and when you think about, if you think about, again, what we were talking about earlier, the different permutations of how the world could sort of turn out. One of the things that's entirely possible is people go, you know, this working from home thing might actually make sense. You know, and that might actually be a more permanent trend. Certainly not for everybody, but for a lot of people might realize, hey, this is actually okay. I like working from home. It's good for the company. It's, you know, it's less expense. And so things that actually have to do with that, even if it's something as simple as like home improvement, because a lot of guys sitting in their basement right now and they're completely miserable because they don't have a good place to work. I'm sure there are probably a lot of people here that might feel that way as well, that they don't have a good place to work and might be thinking, shit, as soon as I have the opportunity, I'm going to want to do something, whatever, you know, we build a little attachment out of the garage or whatever else so that I have actually a proper place to work, or just a desk or some better sort of setup. So, you know, those sorts of things to actually, you know, help with that level of infrastructure. So that there's so many of those sorts of things, anything that has to do with the supply chain right now and helping optimize that and you know, and keep things going. I mean, there are so many of those, if you just sort of think, you know, into all the different ways that, you know, the world is going to change out of this. I mean, you know, I know Connor was just right about this. I mean, online education is huge. I was even trying to get my mother into this. My mom is actually an educator. She's been a teacher of accounting for the longest time. And I'm begging my mom to do this actually, because she's got really good, I mean, her content is actually really great. And, you know, and I think what she would be able to do, I mean, there's so many universities now, they're going to be, you know, doing, you know, online courses and things that they never really thought were possible. And so, you know, being part of that, so not even necessarily like the short-term solution, but, you know, some of the longer term stuff that's going to emerge from out of this. There's so many of those things that you could apply, you know, your talent and skills and, you know, and build businesses around and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of that sort of stuff that's out there, I think, and it'll become more and more obvious over time. I think we probably have time for a couple more. Anyone else? Before we go, I don't even, how do I tell? Lucy, are you raising your hand or are you being, okay. Yeah. Okay, what's up?
Hi everyone.
Hi.
So nice to see you. So nostalgic. Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm being a bit repetitive, but on for Felix's point, you know, obviously everyone's main focus right now is how we can adapt to this situation. In my case, obviously I work in schools, and I've been expanding over the last year, bringing therapists working for me now, and overnight schools closed. So basically everything just stopped. So in my case, was just like, shit, how do I continue my business? And my focus has now gone to creating an online course for parents. But I guess once that online course is live, it's then maybe a new book. But I don't know whether I should be kind of branching out to something new, because the therapy, my work is, you know, children who don't talk at school, which is not relevant right now. Children are very happy. Children who I work with are really happy at home now, chatting away. So I don't know, like, and I'm focusing on, like you say, serving. So I'm doing lots of like more just content production, my free content, working on that. So maybe I should just ride the wave and just, you know, just be building, you know, content which I usually don't have time for. Or should I be kind of branching out and looking into trying a new business of home education or whatever? It's just a tricky one, really. So I don't know, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think in general, Lucy, you're probably going to be able to figure it out. I don't know that any of us really understands your specific business and, you know, who your market is and so forth. Everybody here has a very specific thing that they're doing. Some of you guys have, you know, have really, you know, interesting niche businesses. And that's great. In some respects, you might even be able to ask your customers or your former customers, your previous customers. And, you know, I mean, I know you've helped a lot of people, Lucy, and you've created a lot of value for a lot of people, and you might just be able to kind of sit with them and say, you know, what are the challenges, you know, how the kid's doing at home, all those sorts of things. And, you know, just, you know, with that and, you know, and trying certain things, you'll probably be able to find, you know, zero in on the right target. But, you know, asking me, I don't have selective mutism. So, you know, talk to parents of the kids that do, and you might probably have a lot better idea about where you should focus your attention.
I agree.
Can I add something to that?
I can't see who's talking, but it sounds like Yana.
This is Nina.
No, Nina, where are you? I don't know which screen. There's like 4 screens. I don't know where you are, but go ahead.
I'm in India.
Okay.
All right. So I just wanted to add something to what she said regarding the uncertainty for her business, her teaching business. Currently, I have a son. He's 7, and as we all know, the schools are closed, and I was quite worried about how to keep him busy and study also. And I saw online, there's one platform which encourages parents to enroll the kids to learn from home. And I did that, and it works. So if this is something that can interest you, maybe you can look into it and see how it can work, because it is really happening. Coronavirus is preventing all the parents to let the kids out, and online right now is the way out. So you can approach the parents and then create a nice curriculum and then ask them to enroll the kids. You can have a different batch of several kids and enroll them. I can assure you that it will work. So yeah, this is something I wanted to add for her.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. I think we probably have a few minutes left.
All right.
I see, looks like Carolina raised your hand. Carolina?
Yeah. Hi.
You're on. I saw you earlier. Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Good to see you.
How's it going?
I'm good. I'm doing well. I'm out of the city, so I'm happy about that. I am just curious about the food supply chain. I'm just curious about how things have been going with the farm in Chile, or how things are moving. I just love to hear any experience that someone has, or if anybody has any thoughts on what's going to happen with the food supply chain. I don't know. That seems to be something of interest, because those are all deemed essential businesses. So, you know, how are you?
Yeah, they are. I mean, you've got. I think, hold on, let me make sure Mike's in. Look, there's so many components of that, right? I mean, when we harvest, you know, we produce something in Chile, it goes to a processing center, which we own. It goes to, then it goes to, if it's, depending on where it's exported to, if it's being exported to the US, it has to go to a USDA inspection facility. It gets taken to the port, it gets on a really big boat. It gets shipped, it goes to a warehouse from there where importers bring it in, and then they split it up, repackage it potentially. Then it goes to wholesaler warehouses, and then it ends up in grocery stores, and then to the consumer. There are so many parts of that process where you think about something that was grown in Chile, you know, a single berry or nut or whatever that ends up on the other side of the planet. There are a lot of things that can go wrong. All those things sort of depend on people showing up to work, having access to fuel, having, you know, and it doesn't lend itself well to social distancing and all these sorts of things. When you think about most of the stuff that you've had to eat, you know, this morning or this evening or wherever, a lot of that stuff, most of that stuff probably wasn't sourced locally. A lot of that might have even come from literally the other side of the world. And that is not a particularly resilient system. It does not thrive in turmoil at all. And so there are, you know, sad to say, but a number of risks, I think, in that system. So it's, you know, one way I think to, the flip side of that is I think the entire world, industry, governments, et cetera, everybody understands how important that is. And so that there will certainly be a lot of resources from Jeff Bezos on down thrown at supply chain and so forth to make sure that this is not something that seizes up and goes away. I don't think there will be a problem in terms of food production. There may be certain things that don't get produced anymore because there aren't enough people and all this sort of thing. But for the most part, I think there'll be enough food produced. It's a question of whether or not it's going to be able to get to the consumers in the same way, because, and I'm not saying this to be negative, it's just the reality is, yeah, the supply chain is just not designed for anything like this. And so I think if you guys, you know, if you're not stocked up, you should be. You really should be. And I'm not saying that out of paranoia or hysteria or anything. It's just common sense at this point. You should have shitloads of food in your house simply because the supply chain for anything, including food, is just not designed to deal with this stuff. There are just too many components and too many things that can go wrong. And where we are right now, there's a lot of things that are going wrong. And so, it's not to say that it's all going to come.
Are you saying supply chain for food is a problem or it isn't a problem? Because you said both.
No, I'm saying that the supply chain for food has a lot of components and a lot of things that could go wrong. So I think it would be a mistake to just assume that it's all going to continue to go on like exactly as is, and there's not going to be any problems from all of this. I think that would be a mistake. We can certainly hope for the best, but I think that would be a mistake. And so one way around that is, yeah, sure, go out and grab as much food as you can and store it at home just so you have it. And there's not really any downside with that. One of the things I think we probably could see is not necessarily an all-out failure in the supply chains. There's no more food being transported and all that. But what I think we very well probably could see is interruptions where you go potentially several days where, you know, the grocery stores start to run out of stuff and they don't get the resupply on time. They're supposed to get whatever is daily, multiple times a day, a couple times a week, whatever it is. Every store is different from their wholesaler, from their, you know, regional distribution center, and that stuff breaks down. And instead of happening twice a day, it happens once a week. And you know, it's those sorts of things. And so, yeah, you could see where you come into the store one day and there's just nothing there. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, word gets out on the street, you say, okay, everything's coming on Thursday. And then you go in on Thursday and they're stocked up and it's just pandemonium. You know, that's the sort of thing that I think we could probably see is just, you know, it's designed the way it's been. It's just been this very smooth process. And if it breaks down, it ends up, you know, looking like a heart monitor. It's just a lot of hiccups and you know, you have it and then you don't have it. And, you know, in that respect, if you want to see how people, you know, human beings react in situations of scarcity, just go on YouTube and watch, you know, all those Black Friday videos and watch how people rip each other to shreds over, you know, knickknacks and stuff for, you know, $1.99.
And here's the thing is that these are normal people and they're just like you, actually. You like to think you're better than them, but if you're in an environment where people actually feel that this is why I encourage people to buy food at first. It was not actually because I thought that they wouldn't be able to get it. It's because you don't want to be in an environment where people are panicked, because it will affect you. You're not above it. It will affect you. It'll start to affect your judgment. You'll get worried about stuff you wouldn't be worried about if you didn't have to be around it. So so that can happen and does happen to people, normal people all the time. So having reserves puts you in a position where you can avoid those situations that your own psychology can work against you. You're not above it. You're not above it.
Yeah, nobody is. So that's my thoughts on supply chain. Just, you know, kind of some firsthand experience from what I've seen and some things that could go wrong. So let's do, I think, one more, and then we probably got to wrap it up. Anyone else?
Yeah, I had a question. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Marcela here.
Is that Marcela talking? Hey, what's up?
Yeah, from
Dime.
New York. Crazy times. And I'm curious. I've been saying a lot, and I actually, part of me feels that we're desperate to go back to normal. We know normal is not going to be the normal that we know, but a lot of people are saying that normal was the problem. You know, we cannot go back to normal because normal was the problem. And I'm curious, what are the type of conversations that we could or should be having to really, if those structures are broken and the virus is showing us that everything of our system was collapsing, what are the conversations? Who are the leaders? I of course are not the governments. Like I'm curious to see what are your thoughts on the leadership that will rise in this time of crisis, because those are the people that we should be listening. And I don't see any sort of positive leadership out there. It's just chaos, confusion. Yeah, so leadership and the new normal that cannot be the normal that we were living, because that caused the problem.
Well, I think, Matt was talking earlier about, when we were talking about recessions and depressions and the tide and, how it sort of washes everybody away. It's these sorts of situations where you really prove to the world who you are, or really who you're not. If you're a guru in name only, or you're a leader in name only, but you don't actually have it inside of you. And we're certainly seeing a lot of examples of that. I mean, all over the world, in Brazil and the Philippines, and so many places where you just see the worst possible displays of leadership imaginable. The World Health Organization. I mean, if you want to get Matt really riled up, just talk to him about the World Health Organization. I mean, it's criminal. Honestly, it's criminal.
Criminal.
The way the Surgeon General, the fucking Surgeon General of the United States, told everybody, don't wear masks. Don't wear masks. It's a waste of time.
Dangerous unless
Right,
you're a healthcare worker to wear.
Right. I mean, it's pathetic. Actually, the pitiful displays of leadership that we've seen, and there are also, I think, plenty of, countless examples of incredible displays of leadership.
Yes,
a lot of which from people that nobody on this conference call has ever heard of. But people that are, honestly, like people that just get up every day and they go out and they're delivery truck drivers and they're grocery store cashiers and those sorts of things. I mean, and the things that, that at all those places, there's, those people are afraid, and, they're putting up with horrible conditions. I mean, just the fear and the uncertainty, and they get up every day and they do that stuff. I mean, to me, that in and of itself is actually quite courageous leadership. There's people in those organizations that have to motivate those, workers to actually, show up every day and take those kinds of risks and so forth. So I think it's not all bad. There are really, I think, great displays of leadership everywhere. And, anybody that has any interaction with people, whether it's virtually or in person, has the opportunity to be, the leader that you want everybody else to be. Everybody has the opportunity to do that. You have it too, Marcella. Everybody in your life, who can look to you, for leadership and ways to, to really keep it together and, maintain the right mental attitude. Where it goes in the future, like, I have no fucking idea. I don't have a clue. I don't know that anybody does. Like, there are, potentially good scenarios that come out of it, and there are really scary scenarios that come out of it. There are examples in history of when, of times of crises where, people latch on to, a strong man and, who never lets go of power. And, you end up in weird dictatorships. You end up in weird theocracies. All kinds of things that can happen. Or, everything becomes better as a result of it. I really don't know. I really don't.
I think there's the one major trend, though, that's reversed because of all this, where it was really stretched to its limit, which is the trend toward globalism. I think has been like this rubber band has been pulled to its extreme, and I think it's snapping back to its opposite, which is not nationalism but localism. And so I think the leader, like the problems that we have to deal with are not actually, again, they're not these but ambiguous problems that are really hard to see and touch. They're not problems of ideas. They're problems of realities of the real world, outside your front door. Problems like, where yes, there's a shortage of masks. We know maybe for different healthcare workers all over the country, but really your attention should probably be focused at that hospital that's 3 miles from your house, where there are people who have a shortage of masks, because that's a problem we can do something about. And I think that if you if with the focus on localism in general, is it coming back more that way as we see supply chains fail and that we were too efficient and that they're going to naturally be restructured to be more resilient, taking into account the new risks that are understood. More and more localism. And I think that looking to leadership outside of your front door, you know, and in your neighborhood is really more important than trying to look at these idiots at the CDC or Trump or WHO or anyone else like that. I just think that they're just, emperor has no clothes is very clear, you know, for a lot of these folks at this point. All the congressmen, senators spreading it amongst themselves, you know, not practicing any social distancing that they're mandating everyone else do. So
they're not washing their hands.
Definitely not enough, apparently. But localism. So I think look to localism. Like I think the changes you see will be around you, and that's the best part about that for each of us is that you can do something. Like not looking around on Twitter for like how you can make the world better or anything, but like looking around your neighborhood for something heavy and picking it up, just trying to help. If it's being there for friends that need you or neighbors or whatever. If it's talking to neighbors, I mean, people, the craziest thing is I know my neighbors now. I've never known my neighbors before. I don't know how that happens, but we know who we are now. And I think there's a huge opportunity, I think, that comes from that and understanding the problems that we can fix in the world that we actually live in. And I think if you focus there, you won't feel like scared and disempowered. I think you'll feel like there's some good you can do and it makes it worthwhile.
Bill, any comments before we go?
Hey, this was great. I enjoyed it too. Made a lot of notes. And the only thing I'd add is I've never been a podcast guy, but I've actually been listening to a couple lately that I found a lot of just great stuff in. One of them is called The Knowledge Project, which is by Shane Parrish and Farnham Street. And they deal with mental models, which I think is really useful to just revisit if it's not a part of your ordinary thought process. And the other one's one called Finding Mastery, which I've found really inspiring. He just had a great one with Jeremy Jones, who founded Jones's snowboards and stuff. And you know, so anyway, I'm finding great things like that, and that's how I'm trying to spend my time instead of looking at the news and spinning out with all the shit that I can't control and whatnot. What I can control is my internal processes, and finding tools for that to strengthen them has been really enjoyable. So thanks for putting us together today, Victoria and you guys, and great to see everybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate everybody, you know, tuning in. It was really nice to see the group. I would sort of leave you by saying that this is an amazing group, and remember what I said in the beginning. It's more important than ever to really be very deliberate about who you're spending your time with and how you're spending your time and the things that you're doing, and you know, the people that you surround yourself with. I mean, it really matters. And this is an amazing group, and this is something that you guys are a part of. And if you're not using it, you know, maybe you should be. There are some really, really great people here. You guys are all super impressive. So you can rely on one another. You know, I'm sure everybody's got whatever problem is that you're facing. You know, look, everybody's facing a lot of problems. I'm sure you guys can really help each other out and create a lot of value for one another. And I think it's great. We'll probably, you know, I mean, this is obviously not the end of the road, and whether we do this again or we're able to end up having a live event one of these days or whatever else, obviously, we'd love to see you guys all again. And last but not least, I believe it is Josh Dunlap's birthday today. Am I correct?
Yeah, Josh, where are you? Happy birthday, man.
Hi.
The big 3-0.
The big 3-0, the old man of 3-0. How about that? Well,
happy birthday, Josh.
Yeah, happy birthday, buddy.
Yeah,
okay.
It's a few grey hairs. They're just, they are my next door neighbours, and they have been self-isolating for 3 weeks too. So this is not unhealthy. This is fine.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, wonderful to see you guys. It's been a real pleasure. So be safe, be healthy, be great, and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, great seeing you guys.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys. Have a great one.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice seeing you.
Bye, everybody.